This is Susan Vollenweider from the History Chicks podcast. I'm also a columnist with the Kansas City Star, and you are listening to one of my favorite podcasts, No Extra Words.
Hello there! Welcome to this very special Valentine's Day episode of No Extra Words, the Flash Fiction podcast, for the love of nonfiction. You are going to hear in just a few moments Susan Vollenweider, who opened the show with her beautiful intro, a piece of Flash nonfiction, followed by a response piece of Flash nonfiction to her attempt. They are not love stories. It is Valentine's Day. They do talk about love, but it's a different kind of love, which I think we'll get to in just a moment. Before we do that, though, I hope you will permit me to start with, you guessed it, a story. I get asked all the time why in the world I podcast and write flash fiction. It's something where if you don't write it, you've probably never heard of it. And the answer is I've been writing flash fiction since before I knew what it was. Many years ago, as a young college student, I signed up for a no-credit, learning-only writing class. And because I was a college student, I wrote exactly what I had time for, which was 2- and 3-page vignettes, mostly nonfiction. Occasionally I would cross that ever so wavering line. And the class loved them. I'd share them in writing time, and they would all say, "You have such a way with words, you have such talent. What are you going to do with those?" And I had no response for them. My writing did not fit into the nicely packaged category of novel, article, short story. It was just little bursts of prose that appeared on paper. Years and years later, when I was still writing these, now as mom of a toddler who didn't have time to write anything else, I started looking up what the name was for these things I was writing. And I discovered flash fiction and dove headfirst into it. And the rest of the story is what you hear every week on this show. Flash nonfiction, that's a whole different can of tuna. And it's just starting to be something that writers and publications are starting to explore. And I love it. And I have been wanting to bring you some flash nonfiction for a while. And when I heard from Susan Vollenweider that she wanted me to use her column as part of the show, it was the perfect opening to do it. One of my goals in 2016 is to do more with flash nonfiction. Don't know yet what that's going to look like. Don't worry, I am not starting a flash nonfiction podcast, but I'm hoping you will hear more and see more flash nonfiction in the months to come. In the meantime, please enjoy this column from the Kansas City Star, written by my friend and fellow podcaster Susan Vollenweider of the History Chicks, one of my favorite podcasts. And at the end of the show, I will do a follow-up of my own flash nonfiction to Susan's story. Happy Valentine's Day. Hope you enjoy this sweet treat from No Extra Words, the Flash Fiction podcast.
Cake and Frosting Nostalgia by Susan Vollenweider. She was 6 months old when I started to think about her first birthday. A picture, I thought. I want a picture of her wearing a party hat and shoving cake into her smiling face. The September date long circled on a wall calendar with a happy face and quickly drawn balloons came quicker than I had ever imagined. I knew that my daughter couldn't have cared less that 2 of my best friends had made a 4-hour drive to come see her, or that one set of grandparents were able to kiss her happy birthday. But I made that cake. She wouldn't know the difference, but I thought that personally making the cake, the measuring, baking, mixing, frosting, was a good way to show my love. I had some, perhaps fairy's tale, vision that my love for her would make the cake taste better. It tasted like chocolate cake and maybe a little dry at that, but by the time we got to the cake portion of her birthday celebration, she was full of supper and ready for a nap. But if you put a glowing candle stuck in a small cake in front of even the most tired toddler, you'll get some action and a mess. I hadn't thought that through in my fantasy. Maybe chocolate wasn't the way to go, but I got my picture. And if memory serves, she filled that high chair tray with used supper shortly after the picture was taken. As the years went by, she was joined by 2 brothers who got the same mom-made birthday cake and photo op treatment. I will admit it was partially self-serving. I liked it, not just for the souvenir photograph and the permanently chocolate-stained clothes. I never did wise up about that. But for the feeling that I contributed something that no one else could. Symbolically, it made me think of my role in their lives, that I add a bit of sweetness, and that I'll step out of my ordinary day-to-day routine to make time for them. And, as selfish as this is, I wanted them to think of me with a warm glow of nostalgia every time they're presented with a birthday cake. I wanted to be remembered. Mom made the best cakes. To that end, every year, every birthday, I made them a cake. Each year I would ask what flavor and shape they wanted. Some years they told me to surprise them. Some they wanted cookies or brownies. But every year they got exactly what they wanted, made by me and presented on a pretty cake stand aflame with birthday candles. As with anything you do many times, my baking got better. I learned how not to bake a dry cake and how to make really good frosting. I learned how to make ganache. I learned what to do when the cake sticks to the pan and what to do if the kitchen is so hot that the frosting slides off. Some years there were big parties with friends and extended family. Some years there were small gatherings of 5. At some point, they all began to tell me how they wanted to spend their birthday, and I got out of the party planning duties. But there was always cake. Sometimes square, sometimes round, one time shaped like a star, and once a cake made entirely of cookies and mass-produced snack cakes. And always a picture for when they are grown and gone and someone else is making their birthday cake. And always, always made with love.
1950s Cake Recipes by Chris Baker Dersch. My husband bought the book on our anniversary to piss off his mother. Well, bought is a bit of an exaggeration. My husband picked the book out of the free bin at a garage sale and gave it to me on our anniversary to piss off his mother. The book, or really booklet, is called 10 Cakes Husbands Love, and it was put out by the company that made homogenized Spry, which a quick bit of research tells me was once a competitor to Crisco. There's no date on the book, but Spry's heyday was the 1950s, and that's definitely the right era. I like to bake. I bake lots of cookies and breads, always do my mother's speedy baking powder biscuits with soup, and now that I've rediscovered my 9th grade home ec teacher's pie crust recipe, I am happy to report I am once again very proud of my pies. Those years it was missing, I faked it, and faking it is never good. But cake eludes me. Cakes fall down in the middle, and somehow always come out uneven just when you are supposed to stack them into layers. Cupcakes are a cinch, but in truth, I hadn't baked a cake in years. I told my husband that this isn't the 1950s, and if I baked one of the cakes from the booklet, he would in turn have to bake something for me. I don't think he's ever baked anything in his life. It took a few weeks before I was brave enough to try it. I went for the chocolate rapture cake because, anything worth doing. It required a shopping trip to buy things I don't usually stock my kitchen with, like baking chocolate and corn syrup. Also cake pans. I had to clean the kitchen before I started, and again before starting on the frosting. A 7-minute frosting, which required me jerry-rigging a double boiler and beating boiling hot frosting with my hand mixer for, you guessed it, 7 minutes. By the end of the day, I had a chocolate rapture cake that tasted like cake, with frosting, and a fudge dribble, or ribbon, I think is what the recipe called it. After cleaning my kitchen twice and following an extremely complicated recipe for more hours than I want to talk about, I ended up with cake. One of the ladies at the church once told me that the reason old recipes are so complicated is because women were told to stay in the kitchen and cook for their families rather than pursue intellectual or creative pursuits. That creativity had to go somewhere, so it went into the recipes. My mom baked bread once a week until I was almost 10 years old. One day she realized we didn't appreciate it and stopped doing it, buying her bread in a bag like everyone else. I didn't know what sandwiches made with bagged bread tasted like until after that. I still miss the taste of sandwiches on home-baked bread. I don't know if my chocolate rapture cake tasted better than what I could have made with Duncan Hines, but I can tell you it tasted different. I don't know what the extra flavoring is. Maybe it's just effort. Would it be too much for me to say it's love? I have not forgotten that my husband owes me a cake. It's been 4 months. And I'm waiting. I just hope he doesn't pick the one with the whipped prunes. Thanks for listening to the No Extra Words podcast. For more information on today's stories and contributors, or to learn how to submit your own work, please visit us at noextrawords.wordpress.com. The best support you can give the show is to recommend us to your family and friends. See you next time.